For all the literature that we know and love that comes from the mind of Jane Austen, there is a tremendous amount of autobiographical information about her that we simply do not know. Of the many letters that she wrote, numbering into the thousands, only 161 of them have survived. It was Jane's older sister Cassandra who burned a large quantity of her correspondence, and the rest of it has been lost to history. Truth be told, what we're describing is the loss of personal data in vast amounts, crucial to that which would provide a proper and fully rounded out understanding of Jane Austen, the writer and novelist, as a human being. To think of Cassandra burning the bulk of Jane's letters is difficult to fathom. And so we are forced to ask, what could possibly have been written that would warrant such drastic action? Of course, we can surmise that such destruction had been essential to the preservation of Austen's character, but what does that leave us with? The answer to this question is simple. It leaves us with plenty of speculation as to the nature of these letters, what they contained, and how they could have shaped the complete story of Jane Austen. The tumultuous age in which Jane Austen lived cannot be understated, for all the drama that it created for the United Kingdom. Jane would have been in her teens during the French Revolution, blossoming into full womanhood during the Revolutionary Wars followed by the Napoleonic era. The revolution itself would have affected Jane in ways that none of us could ever deem to comprehend. It's quite shocking, really, to think that Jane's cousin and future sister-in-law, Eliza Capot, the Comtesse de Feuillide, actually had a husband who was guillotined during the Reign of Terror. It's a real blessing that Eliza survived. She was in London when it happened, and it was here that her acquaintance with Henry Austen had led to their eventual marriage. Eliza's relationship with Jane is well known and well documented, and we know that Jane even penned a story based on the two and their famous flirtations entitled Henry and Eliza. And yet, it's the climate of the age that truly gives us something to ponder about all this, if we are willing to read between the lines. William Pitt the Younger and his government had been faced with a number of challenges during this period. It had to prosecute and win the war against Republican France, and they had to defend against radical agitation at home, encouraged by increasing Irish and French agents and radicals. The Irish element emerged from ideas transmitted by the French Revolution. There was insistence on behalf of the British government to retain the island of Ireland, and in order to do so, they had to prevent them from rebelling, as well as preventing France from providing assistance. It's entirely true that authorities at Dublin Castle were concerned with the growth of radicalism and unrest. Both Catholic and Protestant groups were forming organized societies and calling for reform. And it was believed that it could all turn for the worse, spawning the desire for outright revolution. The French influence was feared, and England was determined to do all that was necessary to control the situation. The desire to stamp out radical groups among the Isles necessitated the ramping up of security and intelligence services. Spies, police, security chiefs, militiamen, and local authorities were all employed in the task of gathering information, observing, uncovering, and arresting both suspected radicals and obvious rebels, and of keeping the peace in general. Lodged within the whole of it all would have been the Comtesse de Feuillide herself, steeped in the society of her refugee friends in London. Refugees emigrated from the upheaval in France. In addition, there is Jane's brother, Henry Austen, enlisted in the militia at a time when Pitt's government would have needed men like him the most. How could it be that the life of Jane Austen would not have brushed against the spectre of all this information and intrigue? Of course, it's quite a stretch of the imagination to think, for all of the writing that she did, with the inclusion of her letters both to and from Henry and Eliza, that certain elements of her correspondence would compel us to ask the question: could Jane Austen have participated in a network of intelligence gathering crucial to the issues of national security? Okay, so the hypothesis is a little far-fetched, and book time learning would tend to agree with you. Which brings us to a slightly more realistic theory about the mystery of Jane Austen's letters and why it was that Cassandra felt like she had no choice but to put them to the flames. Where there is no mystery at all is the fact that Cassandra Austen was quite possibly the most important person in Jane's life. They were sisters indeed, but Cassandra was also Jane's best friend and personal confidant. But there is something about Jane's journey into adulthood that has Cassandra behaving in a very specific manner. In spite of the charm and wit that Jane was known for, there is a delicacy about her that Cassandra takes to heart. For starters, it's the body of Jane Austen's juvenilia that seems to represent a time when she had been immersed in a near-fantasy world of storytelling. It would have consisted of writing stories and even presenting some in theatrical versions for the Austen family household. Later in life, Jane's relationship with her niece, Anna Austen Lefroy, is peculiar for the way they bonded over topics of reading and writing. It speaks to some version of Jane longing to retain the splendor of life at Steventon, marked by the dramatic shift in Jane's disposition when the family had been forced to move to Bath. From Cassandra's point of view, it became perceptible that Jane's propensity for writing and storytelling did not translate well into the realms of life at Bath, marriage markets included. Equally as so was Cassandra's understanding of Jane's modified, if not downright depressive state of emotions that came to form as their stay in Bath continued. What we find, as it has been suggested, is that Cassandra Austen developed a kind of empathy syndrome, a frame of mind in which a person's self-needs are set aside in favor of the ones that they love. For example, we see this when, after Cassandra has promised Thomas Fowle that she would never marry another man, her liaisons with Henry Hobday go positively sour. Cassandra bases her rejection of Hobday on her promise to Thomas, but she has fused it with a deep sense of caring for her sister. Cassandra comes to understand that Jane will never marry, and thus, neither will she. It's the kind of loyalty that harkens back to a time when they were children, when the thought of sending Cassandra to school without Jane was intolerable, and their mother is known to have said that if Cassandra's head had been going to be cut off, Jane would have hers cut off too. Nowadays, it's a bit frustrating to think that the Regency era would have dubbed these two as spinsters. And yet, to think of Jane as such evokes a touch of compassion in Cassandra. She has grown up loving Jane dearly, and she cannot bear the thought of Jane experiencing the growing terrors of life as they come, all alone. Jane rebukes Cassandra for neglecting to marry Henry Hobday, but to do so is futile. Cassandra sees more than Jane, experiences her return to form with Jane in their move to Chawton, and remains set on living out her days with her as she develops the unexpected and yet wildly thrilling prospect of becoming a formally published authoress. Apart from a sense of pride in these literary ambitions, Cassandra is equally attuned to the vast highs and lows, gossips and descriptions, praises and cut-downs involved with Jane's career as a highly practiced writer of letters. For example, Jane's avoidance of the marriage market coincides both with Jane's aversion to the notion of actually going through with a pregnancy, as well the perception of her issues with Mary Austen Lloyd. Additionally, it may be that Jane, in her comfort as a talented writer, took to describing aspects about family and friends in her letters that could be described as, well, a little too over-descriptive. As well, such correspondence may have situated Cassandra in a light potentially unfitting, that she had once been in love, but that her future had been derailed nonetheless. It becomes a situation of the extremely personal, because Cassandra was a lifetime devotee to her sister, whose companionship and good cheer may have led to some of the best literature ever created, by a woman whose talent and skills had barely scratched the surface of literary art. And it is through this lifetime of dedication, devotion, and love that we find Cassandra sticking by her sister's side during the worst, when Jane found herself too sick even to get out of bed. Jane Austen passed from this world dearly beloved by a dearest friend and sister, who stuck it out to the very end, with not the slightest notion of second-guessing. Jane never really had anyone else. And it may be through yet another promise that Cassandra made that we know only what we need to know, the best of the best, all that was necessary in what we love most about Jane Austen. Book Time Learning is dedicated to the study of writing and literature. If this video has been helpful or enjoyable for you in any way, please consider clicking the like button and/or subscribing. And thank you for watching.